Wednesday, Bernie Sanders announced that he was planning to introduce a bill that will establish a standard 32-hour work week that would result in no loss in pay. Now, I don't know how much he thinks this is going to get passed in the short run, but I think, much of what we're seeing now is teeing up a potential push for workers, I think, in the next term of the Biden administration, if that term happens. And if there is there's a decent chance the Democrats, if Biden wins, will control both the Senate and the House. I mean, Joe Manchin will not be running again for the Senate, despite the fact that Chuck Schumer apparently tried to get him to. It's unclear where there's pickup opportunities for the Democrats, maybe in Florida, maybe in Texas. Not that much beyond that, but, we could get to a 50-50 tie again and have a Democratic tiebreaker, particularly with this stuff that's coming out of Ohio. We'll see. But the idea is not a terribly radical one. American workers are 4 times more productive in terms of like what their output is than they were, 50 years ago, maybe closer to 80 years ago. But nevertheless, we had a 40-hour work week back in 1940, and we're 4 times more productive. Why not 4 days a week? Here is Bernie Sanders on that 4-day work week in the Senate Health, Education, and Labor Pensions, the HELP Committee hearing yesterday.
And I don't want to talk about statistics. We've heard a lot of statistics. You have been with the union for over 3 decades.
Oh, pause it for 1 second. I should say he is interviewing or questioning Shawn Fain, president of the UAW.
You have been with the union for over 3 decades. No doubt, as president, you've met thousands of workers, you've met thousands of retirees. Tell the American people what it's like to work on a factory floor. In some cases, by the way, I learned this recently. There are people today in America who are working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Unbelievable. But President Fain, talk about the impact on the life of a worker mentally, physically, who is doing hard work day after day, year after year. What happens to that person?
Thank you. So, I find irony in some of the statements I just listened to, but the typical life of a factory worker, and this is union or not, and it's actually worse for non-union workers because they have less rules that govern their workplace. But, when you're, typically many factory workers, many typical schedules in manufacturing are 12-hour schedules, and they're 7 days a week. A lot of these places run around the clock. When you are standing on concrete floors 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, year after year after year, there's a lot of wear and tear on a person's body. As I say, people when they age, they end up, in their older working years, end up getting knee replacements, hip replacements, shoulder surgeries. But I just find an irony in some of this that, mentally, the stress of working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. When you don't get to see your kids, you don't get to go home and have dinner with your kids, you don't get to make sure they're getting their homework done, you don't get to spend quality time with family, or just even if you don't have a family, if you have quality time for yourself. Something sacrificed when you're working 12 hours a day, either sleep or time with family, something else is sacrificed. We only have so much time in a day. But I find an irony in some of the comments that were made by Mr. King as far as the shortage of workers. I don't believe we have a shortage of workers in this country. I think COVID made people wake up and realize what's important in life. And it's not working for $12 an hour and 12 hours a day and multiple jobs to struggle to get by. So this shortage of workers that we see I don't believe it's a shortage. I believe it's a fact that people have woke up and they've decided I'm not going to leave my home for $12 an hour when I can't even afford to pay the bills. And also, going back to, letting the markets determine this, and it's just an HR standard talking point about passing added cost on to the consumer. Well, I witnessed inflation the last 4 years. That wasn't caused by workers. It was caused by two words: corporate greed. It was consumer price gouging. And so, that to me, we got to get focused on the reality here.
And then he followed that up, and we're already getting comments of like to hear President Fain. That sounds
Yes.
pretty good. But here he follows up on the idea that that workers are lazy and don't want to work. I mean, the bottom line is this is the irony of this, right? For decades, the Republicans have pushed this thing called the Laffer curve. And the Laffer curve has been completely debunked. Laffer was an advisor to Sam Brown back in Kansas. I don't know, this is about a decade ago. But the Laffer curve argues that if you start to increase taxation, you're going to depress rich people's desire to accumulate more and more money. And therefore, it's going to inhibit economic activity. That's the argument with the Laffer's curve. That the more you go to the right on the graph and higher up you go, the less revenue you're going to get because people are going to be less productive. Now, this has been proven to be absolute BS. Brownback in Kansas tried this, basically gave over his tax structure to Art Laffer, and it turned out to be a dismal failure. The idea that, rich people will stop making money at one point when they have enough, that's not the way rich people operate. And a lot of the reason why they don't is because all they're doing is they're putting money into investments that they don't even have to work for, and they still get a lower tax rate because it's a capital investment. But you never hear this concept of well, if you don't pay people a decent wage and on top of it, make them do a crappy job, they may not want to do it. That concept, where's that curve? Where's that curve of just how little you can pay somebody and how crappy the job can be until you will recognize that it's not worth their while to go out and do that without having to sort of cite well, then they're going to starve and they won't have health care and their kids are going to be miserable. But here is Shawn Fain pointing out that to the extent that anybody's lazy, that the lazy to rewards ratio is highest not with the people that we hear most of at least right wingers complaining about the lazy bums who are on the government dole. That's not where you see the lazy to rewards ratio out of whack. It's here.
What people, and many in this room will say, they'll say people just don't want to work, or working class people are lazy. But the truth is, working class people aren't lazy, they're fed up. They're fed up with being left behind and stripped of dignity as wealth inequality in this nation, this world spirals out of control. They're fed up that in America, 3 families have as much wealth as the bottom 50% of citizens in this nation. That is criminal. America is better than this. So I want to close with this. I agree there is an epidemic in this country of people who don't want to work. People who can't be bothered to get up every day and contribute to our society, but instead want to freeload off the labor of others. But those aren't blue-collar people. Those aren't working class people. It's a group of people who are never talked about for how little they actually work and produce and how little they contribute to humanity. The people I'm talking about are the Wall Street freeloaders, the masters of passive income. Those who profit off the labor of others have all the time in the world, while those who make this country run, the people who build the products and contribute to labor, have less and less time for themselves, for their families, and for their lives.
It's awesome. He really is such a remarkable spokesperson for these issues. And to return to the first part of what you were saying about the 40-hour work week, right? That was essentially established after the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act, right? And that was also what solidified overtime pay and other benefits under FDR. The 40-hour work week wasn't created in nature. The 40-hour work week was decided upon as a society, just like we decided that child labor laws needed to be standardized and and regulated, and other decisions that we made in the earlier part of the 20th century. So what Bernie's saying is not radical. It's just updating the very framework that we've had in place for, under 100 years. And when it's just incredible to me sometimes when you hear people respond to certain things as radical, as if these structures have existed for centuries and centuries. And
God opens up the heavens and says, it is immoral to work 45 hours a week, but it's also immoral to work 38 hours a week. So I've decided it's 40 hours a week. This is all
about the choices that we've decided to make and the way that we structure our society in government. And I do think that collectively, as the labor movement continues to increase labor education in this country, people are beginning to understand that these are societal choices. These are choices that the government makes and structures, as opposed to just conditions of nature and of of our world that we can't do anything to change.
And we should say that in the 1970s, if you were working a 40-hour work week, you were actually making more money than you are today when you adjust it for inflation. More money in 1970s. So in 50 years, all that we've had in this country is workers sliding back in terms of wages, and then in terms of productivity, way out of whack. I mean, the reason why we chose 40-hour work week was because there was a sense of this is the minimum that we can allow that will allow for a very productive country, but also allow people to have some type of life. And we are now a much more productive society, and we don't need 40 hours a week to work. We can produce more than we did 70 years ago at a 40-hour work week at today's 32-hour work week. And also, to be clear, you will have, that fifth work day, if it's a factory or whatever it is, it's just another shift, and it's just a different cohort of people. So it's not there's not going to be, well, wait a second, I want to go get an ice cream cone on Thursdays. What if everybody's off on Thursday? No, you're going to be able, the ice cream cone store is going to be open the same amount of hours. The difference is that it's going to be hiring more people. And, I don't know if this would necessarily apply to a small mom and pop shop, but certainly, broadly speaking, our society, we're not going to be any less productive. And really what you're going to do is you're also going to be having more people work, less hours, same amount of pay, their ability to go spend and grow the economy stays the same. And I like the fact that at least this is being, obviously this is not going to happen this year. I don't know if it will happen next year, but I like the fact that these ideas are being mainstreamed, that we're hearing them in front of committees, that we're getting Shawn Fain an opportunity to talk to the American public. And again, just a reminder, he's calling for all the unions to have their contracts expire around May Day in 2028. So there is, there's long-term planning that's going on here.
What's nice about Fain, too, is he'll actually name the enemy, whereas from Democrats like Biden, you get the middle class or blah, blah, blah. Fain doesn't say middle class. He says working class.
Right.
And the truth is that when that productivity and all those gains that haven't been going to workers, they have been going somewhere. And they've been going to the exact class that he names there, the passive income class. And that will change. Like that, there will be a change if labor gets a bit greater share, which they should, with regard to the way that those people live. And that needs to be confronted head on.
Iowa Ryan says, COVID lockdown was one of the best times of my life. I was able to have dinner with my kids every night. Barely happened before or since. I'm 44 and never even had a vacation. American life is pretty crappy.
Yeah, well, freedom.
Yep.
Bumbler, I've been thinking about something related to this discussion around Bernie Fain and the idea that Sam just mentioned of a worker's inversion of the Laffer curve, and how it relates to recent influencers like Gabrielle Judge and the lazy girl jobs movement. I'm reminded that there's ostensibly a whole field of study dedicated to the idea of rational slacking, pardon the phrase, called caconomics. The right wing of framing this is negative or about the descent into mediocrity. But I'm interested in the positive potential of speaking about workers' counter-exploitation by reclaiming their time.